the inspiring leader and the infuriating leader are really mirror images of each other. And we exist on this enduring continuum that's made up of how are you behaving today? We worked with a Swiss employment agency, and we did a little experiment. 15-minute intervention for half of these people. Reflect on your values, why they matter, how you demonstrate them. 2 months later, they were twice as likely to have found a job. In fact, the effect was so strong, we stopped the experiment and gave everybody the values intervention. And so when we reflect on our values, it has two things that I think are incredibly important. One is it helps us see the big picture, what really matters. But two is, I think it has this element of optimism. It gives us that energy to go forward.
That's Adam Galinsky. He's a celebrated social psychologist at Columbia Business School who's published over 1,000 studies on leadership, decision-making, teams, and ethics. His TED Talk, How to Speak Up for Yourself, has over 7.5 million views. And now he's sharing some insights from his latest book, Inspire, the universal path for leading yourself and others. So you'll learn 1, the easiest way to uplift the people around you. 2, the 15-minute exercise that makes you visionary. And 3, the quick trick to feeling more confident and powerful. And if you're just joining us in the new year, historically that tends to happen, welcome. It's great to have you. I recommend you check out our website, awesomeatyourjob.com. Search for the cool stuff by keyword or by key topic. And if you want to sign up for the Gold Nugget email list, that gives a summary write-up of all the wisdom and insights that Adam's about to share here, as well as unlocking the vault, the archive of all 1,020 of these summaries. Those are the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mikaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Adam. Adam, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Pete.
I'm excited to dig into your wisdom about your book, Inspire, to get inspired, to become more inspiring. So no pressure, Adam, but we're expecting lots of inspiration to be flowing from you here today.
I hope I can deliver.
Me too. Well, so tell us, you study this stuff. I'd like to hear, in your own lived experience, who's the most inspiring person you've encountered, and what is it about him that inspired you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been inspired by a number of people in my life. One person that inspired me really deeply is my dad, and even my mom too. So both my parents in their different ways. One of the things I talk about in the book is I really compare and contrast two types of leaders that tend to be in our orbit, the inspiring leaders, but also the infuriating leaders. And I think one of the things, when I think about both my parents, I can immediately think about their inspiring characteristics, but also their infuriating flaws that they had. And so I think one of the things that, in studying this topic, is probably maybe the single biggest insight that I've discovered, right, is I've actually answered an age-old question that's bedeviled people for centuries, which is, are inspiring leaders born or are they made? And what I've discovered is, I think pretty definitively, that inspiring leaders are truly made. And the reason why I know this is because there is, and the thing that I've established in my research is that there is a universal set of characteristics that make up the inspiring person. And these characteristics exist in every single country, on every continent in the world. There's not a single inspiring characteristic that doesn't exist in every other country. That exists in one country, it exists in every country. And because there is this universal set of characteristics, those can be learned, they can be practiced, they can be nurtured, and so that we can become more inspiring over time. And if we go back to thinking a little about, my parents, and I said, they're inspiring and they're infuriating, the thing that really, what my research shows is that it's not who we are, it's really what we do. It's our behavior, our current behavior, whatever we're doing today can either inspire or infuriate. And that means that even if we were amazing yesterday, we may be a total infuriating dud today. But the good news is we could be even more inspiring tomorrow.
Okay, well, it's good news that inspirational leaders are made and not born. Otherwise, we'd have a pretty short book and podcast, I imagine, Adam.
That's right. Yes. Well, it could be a whole discussion of how to select those people, right? So it wouldn't be necessarily that short, but it would be a different conversation.
Well, certainly, it would be. Well, and not as much fun, because I am inspired by the notion of being inspirational, to get meta with you.
Yes.
And I do definitely want to dig into this set of characteristics. What are they and how do we learn them? But first, I'd like to hear, generally speaking, as you've dug into all this literature and done the research, Any big surprising or counterintuitive discoveries that made you go, huh, how about that?
I think that one of the things that I've discovered over the course of doing 25 years of scientific research is the power of not just thinking about ourselves, but thinking about others, right? And so one of the first things that I ended up studying in my dissertation was a notion of perspective taking. And then we take the perspective of other people, it opens up a lot of different avenues and possibilities that we might not know, were available to us. And so it helps us be better negotiators. It helps us be better leaders. It helps us be more inclusive, give better feedback. Like you could do a whole list of the things that perspective taking provides to you. But just as one example, I have a paper that's coming out in the top social psychology journal in the World Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in January, paper I've worked on for a number of years. And the title of the paper is called The Vicious Cycle of Status Insecurity. And so one of the mistakes that the people who are insecure about where they stand in the world make is they think they have to tout their accomplishments. They have to show what they've done. And what my research shows is that when we're feeling insecure, we feel reluctant to credit other people for their contributions to us, thinking it'll undermine our own standing. But what my research shows really definitively, even in some of the most competitive contexts, that when we are generous in spirit towards other people, when we acknowledge their contributions to our own success, we not only elevate them, but we also elevate ourselves. We actually gain in status through generosity. And I think that's one of the things that people might instinctively kind of think that might be true, but when they get anxious, when they get insecure, that goes out the window, right? And we focus on the self and what I've done. And so I think maybe the surprising thing is just the power in, it's not all about you, right? And if you focus on others, you're going to benefit, but it's through this sort of other route, if you will.
Yeah, I absolutely buy that. And I've seen it on both sides of the table in terms of when I'm at my best, doing those things, as well as when I see it from others. And I am wowed by, I suppose, anytime someone just over delivers or I'd say is generous in terms of, I guess I think about in sales conversations in which someone says, hey, we'd love to take your money, but actually I don't think we're the best fit for you. We should go over in this direction instead. I end up liking them more and giving them more referrals. It's like, you got to talk to these guys. They're so honest. They're so great. They'll help you out or tell you who can help you better. And it's the world I want to live in, So I think that's beautiful that
Yeah, I think that's right. When we do something that doesn't look like in our best interest, it seems more authentic and genuine, right? Because why would they be doing it if they didn't really believe it? And I think that, becomes really powerful for that. And it also just highlights how important our reputation is to us, like how people think about us, how they talk about us, what they share about us. And so that's another, I think, I use this phrase that I really like about spreading the seeds of inspiration. I'll come back to this later, but I have an acronym that I use called REAP. It's a homonym from the Bible and, reap what you sow. But the idea is that what you put out in the world comes back to you. So if you're inspiring to others, they're going to be inspiring to you. But if you're infuriating to others, you're going to get infuriation back. And I think that's something so important. One of the foundations, and we'll talk about the characteristics, as you said, and sort of how we can utilize those characteristics. But one of the foundations is really living your values, right? And how you can live your values. And my number one value, I have a values card. It's in my pocket with my top 5 values and in a hierarchy. My number one value is generosity. And it's that idea that if we're generous to other people, not just in substance, but even in spirit, we're going to produce a better world, not only for others, but also for ourselves.
Okay, well, let's dig into some of these characteristics.
Sure.
Lay them on us.
Well, so to give your listeners a little background. So what I've done over the last 20 years is I've asked people all over the world to tell me about a leader that inspired them. I've asked people, what does it mean to be inspired? And people use words like energy or warmth or light. And the way that I describe it is a wellspring of hope and possibility. It changes you inside. It gives you this feeling. And I say to people, what was it about that person that inspired you? I want you to tell me the exact characteristic. Be a scientist, pinpoint what it is that really changed you inside. And then over the course of time, I started asking another question. I said, okay, I want to talk about a different leader that changed you inside. But instead of creating that wellspring of hope and possibility, they created this seething cauldron of rage and resentment. And what was it about that leader that made your blood boil, that infuriated you. And so by collecting thousands and probably even tens of thousands of these examples across the globe, I've been able to sort of analyze and study them and use sort of scientific techniques to reduce them to some core factors. And these three universal factors, I'll tell you sort of my first insight is that the inspiring leader and the infuriating leader are really mirror images of each other. And we exist on this continuum, right? This enduring continuum that's made up of how are you behaving today? And so just as a couple quick examples, inspiring leader is generous. We already used the word generosity, right? Infuriating leader is selfish. Inspiring leader is courageous. Infuriating leader is cowardly. Inspiring leader sees the big picture. Infuriating leader is small-minded, lost in the weeds. So one of the things we can start to see is that these are mirror images of each other. And the second thing is that continuum is made up of these three enduring factors. There's being visionary, which is how we see the world. There's being an exemplar of desired behavior, how we are in the world. And then being a mentor, how we interact with others in the world. And one of the things that I've discovered is there's a reason why these are the three universal factors. And the reason why these are the three universal factors is because they each satisfy a fundamental human need. We're inspiring people because we're satisfying a need. So to be visionary satisfies the human need for meaning and understanding, right? We crave meaning. To be exemplar satisfies the fundamental human need to feel protected and safe, but also to feel propelled, by people's passion and energy. And then mentor is one of the universal factors because it fulfills the fundamental human needs for a sense of belonging and inclusion on the one hand, but feeling like that you have status and are respected on the other hand. And so these three universal factors. I actually have a term that I use a mnemonic device to help people remember it. I call it the Venn diagram of inspiring leadership.
The EM.
It's like a Venn diagram. You have visionary, you have exemplary, you have mentor, and inspiring's in the middle of those concentric circles. But that really sort of captures those three elements.
Yeah. Woo, you brought the goods and some social psychology chops in action, our deep human needs. And on the mentor side, I'm thinking about, we got the belonging and the inclusion, and also the sense of learning growth mastery that occurs when we're getting good tidbits from a mentor. Like, oh, wow, that's brilliant. And now my skills have been upgraded and I feel great as a result of that as well. So we're ticking all kinds of deep human boxes here. But I'll tell you, Adam, when you said that these inspiring leaders are made and not born, it feels like a tall mountain to climb to just develop these characteristics within us. If we're not so visionary and exemplary and mentory, how do we get more of that goodness going for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So for each of these, I can go into a little bit more detail, but also say, how do we get into a visionary state of mind that makes us and propels us to be more visionary? How do we get into an exemplar state of mind, right? How do we do those things? And so let me just start with, I think visionary is such a straightforward one and really helpful. So what does it mean to be visionary? Well, visionary has three characteristics. It's kind of like what we say, right, is one of it, how we say it, and when we say it. And the what basically is big picture, optimistic vision of the future, right? So we see the big picture, but we also see a positive version of what the world can look like. Now, how do we say it? Well, my research shows and other people's research shows is you want to do two things. You want to simplify it to its essence, but you also want to visualize it, make it come to life. So one of the examples I love to give is, you could have the mission. Our mission is to have satisfied customers. That's a good mission, right? You want to have your customers be satisfied. But now let's just tweak it a little bit and see how it changes. Our mission is to make our customers smile. Now that word smile is something we can visually see, right? And then we can think about, well, what is it that we can do to bring that smile onto our customer's face? And that actually simple change from satisfied customers to make our customers smile engages people more and motivates them more. It produces better outcomes, better products, if you will. And then the final thing is that if you want your vision to stick, you got to share it and repeat it again and again and again and again. And one of the things I think we fail a lot of times is we fail to recognize that for something to stick, we need to hear it a lot of times. I mean, here's a good example. what does almost every song in the world have?
Oh, a refrain,
Yeah, a chorus, a refrain, right? That tells us if almost every song in the world has the same exact feature, a repeated line, a repeated chorus, a repeated refrain, that probably tells us the human mind needs some central idea to be repeated again and again. And so that's another thing that I find that people are very good at. So now we can be both practical, very specific, but we can also be sort of a little bit broader. So here's the practical thing. Look at how you're communicating and ask, can I simplify this? Can I be more economical in my words? But can I, in doing that, also make it more visual and vivid and metaphorical and come to life? So that's like a very practical thing you could do. But what I've also shown is how do we get into a general visionary state of mind where we can really see the big picture? And that is a technique that comes back to what I said earlier about values. And so one of the things that 2 decades of research shown, my own research has shown this, I've done multiple studies, that if you get people to reflect on their values, and I call this your values hierarchy. I got my colleague Paul Ingram has done amazing research on this, but so this is what we tell people. Think about your values, what really matters to you. Now pick 4 or 5 values, but put them into a hierarchy where the top value sort of animates the rest of your values. Now that's your value hierarchy. Now what I want you to do is I want you to think about why those values matter to you. Also, when have you demonstrated those values in your daily life? And here's one study we did. One of the worst things that can happen to anyone in their life is to be unemployed, to be laid off, to be fired, to lose your job. It's increases anxiety, depression, even suicide. So we worked with a Swiss employment agency, government employment agency. Every citizen in Switzerland, if they want to get unemployment benefits, has to go into one of these agencies and register. And we did a little experiment. 15-minute intervention for half of these people. We did exactly what I just told you. Reflect on your values, why they matter, how you've demonstrated them. 2 months later, they were twice as likely to have found a job. In fact, the effect was so strong, we stopped the experiment and gave everybody the values intervention. When we reflect on our values, it has 2 things that I think are incredibly important. One is it helps us see the big picture, what really matters. But 2 is, I think it has this element of optimism. It gives us that energy to go forward, right? Because what do you need to do to get a job? You got to apply. You got to suffer the slings and arrows of rejections, right? And you got to keep going, right? And you got to keep applying to other jobs. And so reflecting on our values both helps you see what really matters and gives you that optimistic, positive energy to go forward. So we can become more visionary, both with very fine-tuned practicality. How do I simplify my messages? Or how do I make sure that people see the big picture? But we can also do it more sort of organically by reflecting on our values.
Adam, what we love to hear so much here is a little bit of an effort produces just an extraordinary result. Like a 15-minute value intervention is phenomenal, which reminds me of a conversation we had with Dan Cable about, I think, a short, it might have been a 1-hour intervention in terms of introducing yourself to your colleagues about who you are at your best, reduce the attrition by over 30%.
Yep.
And so I think that is just astounding in terms of zooming in on this stuff. It's just amazing in that our human spirit, I don't know how to say it, Adam, but it's like, it seems like it's so easy for us to lose sight of our values, our North Star, that which makes us come alive and be all we can be. And apparently we can get there with just a pretty quick refresher.
Yeah. And, I think this is a great transition to the second universal factor, being exemplar, because I think Dan's intervention it's a little bit about values, but it's also something a little bit broader. So what does it mean to be an exemplar of desired behavior? So what it means is being a calm and courageous protector who's authentically passionate, who's super, but also human, right? They're not perfect. They have their own vulnerabilities. And so I've shown in a lot of different ways why that matters. So how do we get people into an exemplar state of mind? Well, in 2003, I introduced something, and Dan's research kind of builds all of this, an intervention that has been used in hundreds of experiments across the world. And we basically did analysis of all those experiments and showed that it's got deep scientific validity. But we simply asked people to kind of do what Dan did, but we said, think about a time when you were powerful, in control, right? And your best self. And we target it at a more micro level, right? So imagine you're going into a negotiation. Think about when you're powerful and in control and your best self at the negotiating table. Or you're going in for an interview. Think about when you're powerful and control at your best self in an interview. Or think about giving a speech in front of people, right? Think about the time when you felt powerful, really in control on that stage. And so what that does, the reason why that's so powerful, that reflection, is because you're building off your own lived experience, right? Authentically building off your own lived experience. You're not recalling what someone else did. You can feel yourself. You're like, yeah, I negotiate. You might have negotiated one time out of 10 well, but you can still recall that one time you did it well. And that's a real powerful way to leverage that. And we've shown in our research that when you do that, people do better in interviews. We actually have, that people are more likely to get a job. We've shown they give better speeches. Other people in Europe have used my intervention, measured people's physiological reactivity before a very stressful event, and they were physiologically calmer after engaging in that. And so one of the things the way that I like to describe it is, if you want to be super, you got to be able to remember when you were super, right? And that's sort of one way of being able to tap. And then you go out and act super, right? When you can do that. And so I think that's one thing that's just so powerful and so important for people, is to, remember that we have those experiences when we did something really, really well, and we can recall and really sort of build off those experiences. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I want to introduce another topic really quickly that I think is really important. So I know you have 3 kids, and so your parents, you're a dad, your kids look up to you, right? Because as that parent, it could be just because you admire someone. It could be because someone's really important to you, right? And so anytime someone gives you their attention, your behavior, your words, the way you stand, the way you interact, are going to have a big impact on people. And so I've coined a phrase. I call it the leadership amplification effect, or the leader amplification effect. And the leader amplification effect basically says that when we're in a position of leadership, or where people are looking up to us, or we really matter to them, they're paying attention to us, their eyes are on us. And one of the fundamental scientific truths that govern all of mental life is that the things that we pay attention to get amplified. Whatever stimulus we're looking at, that stimulus will have a bigger impact on us, right? We'll get intensified reactions. And so it's just sort of one example would be, I still remember 30 years ago, my first doctoral seminar when I was a PhD student with a guy who'd win the Nobel Prize in economics. And I, raised my hand one day, first day of class, have 11 fellow students, I want to demonstrate that I belong, I'm at Princeton University, this Ivy League thing, but feeling a little insecure. And I think I have a really nice point to make. And I still remember what Danny did 40 years later. He crossed his arms, shook his head, scrunched up his face and said, "That's not right at all." And then he smiled and he moved on, and the rest of the class moved on. But I was frozen, right? I felt humiliated. It was crushing to me. And so Danny doesn't remember this, right? It was nothing to him, but to me, it just felt like humiliating criticism. But 6 weeks later, I'm walking in the hallway, and Danny, without stopping he doesn't even stop walking. He just says over his shoulder, "Hey, Adam, I love reading your reflection papers. You're a great writer." And they turn the corner. But that comment has nurtured me for 30 years. And so one of the things is that when we're in a position of leadership, the reason why our words matter so much, the way we are in the world, how we interact with others matter so much, is people are paying attention to us. And some of it's because we have power and authority, but sometimes it's just because they look up to us and they care about what we think. Our whispers are going to be shouts. Our comments are going to get amplified, and the reactions we produce are going to be intensified. And so one of the things we have to learn as parents, but as leaders, is that nothing we say is offhand. Everything has an impact. And so that's one of the things we have to be aware of to be inspiring, is to recognize the powerful impact that our words, behaviors, and interactions have.
That is huge. And I've heard a number of leaders say, and I've lived this myself, that it's the weirdest thing. When I became a leader, my suggestions became commands. And so that's one form of the amplification, but it's great to flag the other ways that your stuff is being amplified, and the impact and consequences of that there.
One of my favorite stories about this, Barry Salzberg became CEO of Global Deloitte, which, tens of thousands of employees. And about 6 months into being so, he noticed that there were bananas at every sort of executive meeting. And he's like, God, I've been at Deloitte for 30 years. Is it a symbol of Deloitte I didn't know about? Or, does someone really important love bananas? So he asked his assistant, he said, hey, why do we have bananas at every meeting? She said, because you love bananas. He's like, wait, what? So the first time he walked into a meeting where she was present, she was paying incredible close attention to everything he did because she wanted to please him. And she noticed he picked up a banana with a little bit of enthusiasm. And so she coded in her mind, Barry Salzberg loves bananas. We must have bananas at every meeting. And that's not even a suggestion. That's just like, he's like, ooh, banana, and like, just might want to have a little potassium that day. But like, then it became like a law. And so that's sort of a great example of the leadership amplification effect. He didn't even say anything to anyone. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was just a dollop of enthusiasm.
Yeah. Wow. That is telling. Well, I'd love to get your perspective, Adam, before we hear about some of your favorite things. Given what you've learned about the impact of the things we do or don't do, and then the relative prevalence of these behaviors, if you could lay on us just a couple of your top do's and don'ts that you think could make a world of difference for us, what would they be?
I'll go through a few do's, right? So the first one is always think about the big picture. What is really going on here? Like, try to put things into context, to understand people's behaviors. And I'll just give two examples that relate to being a parent, because I think they're really, really powerful. So I had two kids very close in age, just like you, right? And so I had a kindergartner and a first grader, and the kindergartner's classroom was on the second floor and the first grader's class was on the third floor. And I take them to school every day. So naturally, I dropped the kindergartner first because as we walk up the stairs. My first grader is very type A, very impatient. I want to get to school. My kindergartner, like most second-borns, likes to relax a little bit, take his time, likes to have a big ritual with me saying goodbye. And Asher would be like, hurry up, Aiden. And I would get very frustrated. Asher would be like, just be patient, why can't you be patient? And then Asher would march upstairs and he'd run in the classroom without saying goodbye to me. And about a month into this, we were walking one day and had an epiphany. And I was like, what if I drop Asher off first? So I said to my kids, hey, why don't we all walk up to the third floor, drop Asher off first, then walk down to the second floor? And it was transformational. So Asher got to go at the time he wanted to. He'd give me a hug. I'd get to go downstairs. Aiden could take his time. No one was rushing him. And by day 3 of this, his teacher, I never even talked about this with his teacher, Aiden's teacher, the kindergartner's teacher, said, wow, dropping Asher off first has been a big success. Like, she noticed, you could see Asher getting frustrated and angry. And like, I could yell at Asher. I could tell him to be patient. I could try to give him some type of gummy to make him calmer, right? But he was saying, I need to get to class on time, right? And so then if we start thinking, how can I allow Asher to meet his needs, but also have Aiden meet his needs, we just reverse the drop-off order. And so when I talk about seeing the big picture, it's like really sort of understanding all the people that are in sort of an orbit and how they interact, And so, I think these are very, very powerful things. What is it that people need? I mentioned these fundamental human needs. What does this person need right now? I'll give you just one other quick example. It's very top of mind. My mother-in-law has lived with us for 8 years, and my older son is very attached to her. And she's moving now to Las Vegas. And she's moving literally next week. And about 2 weeks ago, my son started being just really salty towards his mom, my wife, just being really rude to her and angry at her. And, she was getting a little like upset by this, and it's hard not to take it personally. But the big picture is he's mad that his grandmother's leaving, right? And he's furious, but he can't express it to her. In fact, they've actually never had a fight, like he's her safe person, And so he's taking out on the person that's closest, right? The mom. And so once you see the big picture, you can start to recognize what's going on, but then we can be visionary, right? We can start to help him have context for his feelings. Hey, Asher, I know you're really, it's really hard with Lola leaving, and the other day he whispered to me, he didn't want his brother to hear this. He said, I'm really sad that Lola's leaving, and so helping. So that's what I mean by sort of being visionary. How do we see the big picture and really recognize what really, really needs to happen? Seeing the big picture allows people to handle the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? Like, think about people going into war, right? Soldiers potentially giving up their life, but for a bigger idea, right? So the first do is be the big picture. The second do, right, is to remember that when we are in these positions of leadership, our emotions are infectious. And so when we're calm, we calm other people down, right? But if we're anxious, we're going to make other people even more anxious. So we really have a duty and a responsibility to regulate our own emotions in those experiences, even as parents, right? To not get angry, right? My old dean, he would have these faculty meetings where people were speaking viciously to him. He was always so calm. And I was just so amazed that he could just handle that. Like he never reacted. He never blew off the handle. Apparently he did so sometimes in private, but like never in public, when it really mattered. And so I think that's the other do. And then the final do that I'll give is elevate others. When you see someone do something good, let them know. And when they did something that really helped you, express gratitude. And I'll tell you a story about that. Every time I teach, I give people the leader amplification effect call to action. And I say, I want you to pick 3 people that are less powerful than you. And I want you to send them some message that says, hey, you really knocked that presentation out of the park, or thank you so much for helping me on that, report. I couldn't have done it without you. And I want you to be specific, right? Because if you come across as inauthentic, that's infuriating, right? So this was 10:15. I was in front of a group of 50 CEOs and presidents. And at 10:29, one of them raised his hand and said, I already sent my 3 emails, already got 3 responses, and they were gushing with excitement. One of them said, I'm finally going to take my spouse to that new restaurant they always wanted to go to. I really like this example because, first of all, it proves something I found in my research, which is people in powerful roles are very impulsive. This guy couldn't even wait to 10:30 in the break, right? He had to send it off right away. But it also shows it didn't take him any time at all to do it. Like it cost him a couple of minutes and it transformed people's lives.
And what's the content of the email? You just say, hey, what you think is great about them, or?
Yeah, or just anyone. Just think about 3 people who in your orbit who have less power than you that deserve some expression of gratitude or praise, and be specific about what they did. So it could be anything, And I was telling the story, and a president of a bank, 1,400 employees that are under his charge. He said, actually, I do that every day. And I said, do what? He said, I actually send out an email to every single employee on their birthday. And he showed me an example. He said, here's the one I sent this morning. It said hey, Trisha, I hope you have a great birthday. How was bowling and track this weekend? Right? That's all he wrote. And then he showed me her response. It was like a novel, described everything about bowling track. He's like, I actually never even read her email because it's so long, but she was so excited to get this. And one of the things that this president said, which really struck me, is he said, I know my message puts a skip in their step, but it actually puts a skip in my step. I get their message back and I feel so good. And so one of the things that I've come to the conclusion of, here's a do and a don't. Now, we always say, do something in person, communicate with someone in person, face-to-face is better. But if I were to praise you, Pete, and say, oh my God, you are the best podcaster I ever saw.
Oh, shucks, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank
it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because how do I respond to that, right? It feels good. But now imagine I wrote that to you later and you can read it. You can reread it, right? Mm-hmm. You can
save it and read it when I need to read it months later.
Right. You can send it to your spouse. You can show it to your 8-year-old, say, look what this person said about me. So actually by writing it, and then it's much easier for people. If I say to you, you're like, oh, you did that. You're kind of a little bit embarrassed, a little bit, oh, thanks, trying to push it away. But if I were to send that by email, I'd be like, oh, thanks so much. This is what I work towards. You'd be more expressive over writing. And, when I praised my dean yesterday, I mentioned I praised my dean. There was a long, awkward silence. He didn't really know how to deal with it. And then he sort of commented about how much he'd learned from the management division, and stuff like that. But so here's an example where putting something in writing is better than saying it in person, because you let them savor it, you let them share it, and you let them respond in a gushing way that lets them express their appreciation, but puts a skip in your step.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Big thanks to Adam for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Acorns. If you've got a New Year's resolution to save more money this 2025, don't be among the 92% who fail. Become awesome at saving your money with Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing, so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5 or even just your spare change. And it doesn't take much time at all. I find the Acorns site and app to be beautiful, easy, convenient. NerdWallet rates them excellently, and so do I. So head over to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And a little disclosure here, paid on client endorsement, compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Now, could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Confucius, and it says, "Tell me and I will forget. Show me and I may understand. But only when you involve me will I truly remember."
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Here's a study that I love more than any other study, and I've been using it in my teaching for 25 years. It's one of my dissertation advisors, Marcia Johnson. She did this in 1973 or 74. And it's such a simple study, but it's so profound. She just basically gave people a description of something. As, goes something like this. It says, like, first you take the things and separate them into different piles. Then you have to decide if you have to go somewhere else. If you have to go somewhere else, then you do that. But you also don't want to do too much at the same time. And after you're done, then you put things back into their appropriate places. And I've given this to thousands of people across the globe, when I'm presenting and I ask people, does anyone know what's going on in this scenario? And like less than 5% can solve it. So that's one of her conditions. Here's her other condition. She gave them a title and then she read the description to them. And the title in this case was, drumroll, doing the laundry. And then you realize, doing the laundry, separating things, whites and darks. Okay, do you have a washing machine here or do you have to go somewhere else? Oh yeah, you don't want to overstuff it because you might break the machine or ruin things. And then you put them back in their places. Now, the reason why this experiment is so powerful is because it's not just that it was easier to read when you got the title, it's what happened later. When she asked people to recall what they read, right? The people who got the title couldn't remember it word for word, but they remember the gist, and the people who didn't get the title, some of them couldn't even remember reading anything. It was like they couldn't even process it, right? And so this is really about being visionary, right? Being visionary, giving people a vision gives them that title, right? If you have the title, every word makes sense. Every sentence connects with the other sentences, right? Other people reading it you're synchronizing with them. And so to me, it's like such a small, profound study, that really captures it. I'll just mention one other study also from the 1970s, but they took two people, let's say you and I, and we say, hey, Pete, you're going to teach Adam about Indonesia. So we're going to give you some material. You're going to spend 25 minutes learning about this information so that you can teach Adam about it. And then you're going to give me the same information and say, hey, Pete's going to teach you about Indonesia, but I want you to read this material and study it so you're prepared, So it's like just randomly assign you to be the teacher and me to be the student. And then later they give us a test on, before we interact, a test on Indonesia. And we had the same amount of time. We had the same material. You would learn it better than I did. And so just being in that teaching mode makes you process information differently. I think part of it, again, is being visionary. You're thinking about the big picture. You're thinking about how things connect to other. You're thinking how you're going to communicate it. And because you're doing all of those things, you're making connections, processing information deeper, and really understanding not just the individual facts, but also how they come together. And so that's really another story about empowerment, right? That we just talked about, is that like putting people into that teacher frame of mind is more powerful than a student frame of mind.
And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job.
My favorite tool is the thing that I kind of came up with in 2003, right? Which is like using our own lived experience to reflect on them at the right moment in time so that we can be whatever we need to be in that moment.
And a favorite habit?
I mean, I think the favorite habit that I would say is trying to do that leader amplification effect, right? That gesture of generosity and ideality. That would be my favorite habit. I haven't instituted it yet, but I think how can we build in habits of generosity, I think is probably the most important thing. It's my number one value. And I think it really is the key to spreading the seeds of inspiration.
And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
I think one thing that people really find powerful is that leader amplification effect, right? Recognizing that what I do and the way that I am in the world is really impacting people. And it's very eye-opening for people. I'll tell you one funny story, which I really love is, I've been doing the laundry study for 2 decades now. And about 10 years ago, a woman told me that she wrote, "Do the laundry," and she put it on her, like a Post-it on her screen, next to her screen. And it was on there for like 2 or 3 weeks. And finally, one of her subordinates walked by and is like, "Are you ever going to do your laundry?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like to remind me to always remember like the vision and remember the big picture." And then they started using that as a catchphrase to like when they felt like that they weren't seeing the big picture. They're like, say, "Do the laundry." And then that would get them. So that's like an example of a nugget that someone took from one of my lectures and really then implemented it and utilized it and hopefully made, their organization better.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
AdamGalinsky.com. And the book is Inspire.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Once a month, ask yourself these 2 questions. When was I inspiring in last month and when was I infuriating? So that's sort of one set of reflections and sort of think about what it was, but also think about who was inspiring in your orbit in the last month. What was it about they did that changed you inside and how could you emulate the behavior? And so I want you to take those, your own personal reflections, those emulations, and then I would just want you to form a single intention about one thing that you're going to do differently in the next month.
All right. Adam, thank you. This is fantastic, inspiring. I wish you much inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Boy, I love it so much when a well-credentialed scientist comes with evidence suggesting I can do very little to achieve a whole lot. And Adam brought the goods in spades on that dimension here with regard to just reflecting on your values or a time that you were super makes you more visionary, inspiring, less prone to stress, less prone to quitting, all kinds of good things flowing from that. Highly encourage you tap back into your North Stars. Enjoy the goodness in the new year and beyond. If you want to check out the show notes or transcript or the links to Adam's that we've referenced here, please visit us at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1020. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.